Hey guys, we went through this in class, but I think it's a lot to try to pay attention to, write down and everything. So I'm gonna make a video of going through the same problems again. And that way you can just kind of watch the parts that you might need a little bit more help with. So the first thing that we did is just operations with polynomials. Operations simply means like adding, subtracting, and multiplication. We dealt with division later. So in this first problem, the key thing is the negative sign, and that has to get distributed to everything in there. So I kind of like to write those factors, or terms I should say, out so I can kind of remember who is positive, who is negative. Then I'm going to go along and just combine like terms. So I'm going to look for the highest powers, which is going to be a cubed. So I have a 4 and a minus 9, so I end up with -5 of those. Then I look for squares. I have a -7 and a positive x. So I'm going to have -6 when I combine them. Plain x's, I have a 1 here and then 8 more here, so I'll have 9. And then in terms of numbers, it looks like I have a -11 and a -17, which go together to give me -28. Here I have 7x to the 4th out in front. So this is going to be a matter of distributing. I'm supposed to be multiplying. So the numbers multiply, and then the powers, if I take 4 x's and combine them with 3 more, I end up with a 7. In this second term, I get -35 from the 7 times 5. I have 4 x's, but I'm combining it with 2 more. Here I'm going to have 7 times 3. 4 x's combining with that 1. And then at the end, I'm going to have 7 times -4. And I have my 4 x's, but I didn't combine it with any more. So that is my final answer. This one is a square. Keep in mind that that does not mean you square each individual piece. It means you're taking that thing times itself. Then you're going to go ahead and FOIL. So first, outside, inside, last, and those negatives cancel. These combine, so I get 4x squared minus 28x plus 49. Here I'm going to need to double distribute. It appears I'll need to distribute the 5x, so I'll get -15x cubed plus 5x squared plus 40x. When I do that, then I need to go back and distribute the -2, being careful that it's negative. So that -2 times -3 becomes a positive 6x squared. I just like to line them up. This is going to give me a -2x and a -16 for a final answer, combining like terms. -15x cubed, 11x squared, 38x minus 16. Alrighty, so now we're looking at 5-4, where we did factoring and solving by factoring. Keeping in mind that those are two different verbs. If you're just factoring, you stop sooner than you do when you are solving. So this says, we have a lot of dog motion going on here, sorry. This says to factor completely and then solve. So you guys have seen me kind of make my factors and my zeros. Keep in mind that solving just means to find the zeros. Those prompts or verbs all mean the same thing. So when I go to factor, one of the things people forget is that it has to, first of all, before I start, it has to be equal to 0. So I'm going to move that 21x over if I'm solving. But then I always look for the greatest common factor, and these all have an x in common, leaving me with 2x squared plus 11x minus 21. This is one of those tricky kinds where there's a number in front of the x squared. So I use my little cheaty method where I put that 2 in 2 places. And then here I multiply these together. They make 42. So I'm thinking of a way to make 42 that will subtract to be 11. And so 42, okay, so 14 times 3 is going to make 42. And it's going to subtract to be 11. For the 11 to be positive, the signs will have to dole out like that. And then if I use this kind of cheaty way where I left the 2 from here in both places, I do have to remember to reduce. Sometimes one, sometimes both. In this case, I get an x as one of my factors. I get the 2x minus 3 because that does not reduce. And then this one I could divide out to 2, leaving me with x plus 7 as my third factor. So when it says to factor completely, that's my work right here. When I then have to solve, I'm asking what makes each of these factors equal 0. So my solutions would be 0. Then this one would turn into 3 halves, and this would give me a 0 of -7. So factor completely was down here, and then solving would be my zeros. Taking a look at number 6, same thing. I want to pull out any greatest common factor, and in this case, the only thing I can take out really is a -2, leaving me with 16x squared minus 9. And I took out the negative because I don't like to have this leading term be negative. But now you might feel stumped, but keep in mind this has 2 parts. This is the square of 4x. This is the square of 3. So we have that scenario where we have the difference of 2 squares. And you kind of just need to know that factoring pattern by now, that it'll break down into the sum and the difference of those. So in terms of my factors, I have a -2, a 4x plus 3, and a 4x minus 3. When I go to find my solutions or my zeros, -2 cannot become a 0, so that doesn't really give me any solutions. That doesn't contribute an answer. But here, -3/4 and +3/4. So these two would be my zeros or solutions. These 3 would be my factors. In number 7, same thing. I'm trying to factor completely. And so I actually have to get everything to one side. So I'm going to move the 4x and the 12 over by subtraction. And then if you look back to your factoring notes and what we learned about that before, you have to do that with grouping. So now I chop it in half. I take out the greatest common factor of this first part. Then I pull out the greatest common factor of the second part. And when I do that, these 2 leftover bits in the parentheses have to be the same. That's kind of how factoring with grouping works. So then I take that out in front and treat it like a common factor, leaving me with the things I had pulled out before as the other factor. But it says factor completely, and this is the square of x and 2, so that breaks down further using the difference of squares, and then I still have my x plus 3. So these will be my 3 factors. So when I go to think about what are my factors and what are my zeros or solutions, I have an x plus 3, x plus 2, x minus 2, generating zeros that look like that. So when it says to factor completely, that's here. When it says to solve, that's these. And I would say, oh, that means x equals -3, -2, and +2. All right. Now in 5.5, we got into some kind of big stuff. We got into long division and synthetic division. Here we have to use the long division because what we're dividing by is not just x plus or minus something. So this is going to be a doozy, and I write so big it'll be really tricky for me to fit this in here. I'm going to give it my best shot. So I'm going to go ahead and write out what I am starting with. I'm paying attention to see if I need to leave any zeros, and I actually do because I don't have any x squareds in my problem. And then I'm going to do that divided by x squared minus 2x plus 3. I look at this and my first term and I think, okay, what do I have to multiply the x squared by to make it 5x to the 4th? And my answer would be by a 5x squared. Now, some of you preferred thinking, what's 5x for divided by x squared? 2 of these cancel 2 of these, and then you still end up with the 5x squared. So whatever way makes the most sense to you. Okay, so now I need to take that 5x squared and I need to multiply it by this piece over here. So again, I'm going to just use this as space. If it helps you to write it out, then you can kind of look at it and say, okay, that will give me 5x to the 4. This will give me minus 10x cubed. And then here I'll get a 15x squared. Once you've got that done, you have to subtract the second row. So I'm going to subtract, and then subtracting a negative turns positive, and then subtracting here. These cancel as they should. This, a positive 7 and a positive 10, is going to give me a 17x cubed. Here I'm going to get minus 15x squared, and I'm going to drop my negative 6x. Alrighty, so then I'm going to go round 2, and I'm going to ask myself, what if I had 17x cubed and I was dividing out the x squared out in front? And when I do that, 2 of these cancel 2 of these, and I'll get a 17x up here. Then I need to take that 17x and multiply it by the thing on the side, giving me 17x cubed, which is what I was going for, minus 14x squared, and then plus, what's that going to be? Wait, what am I doing? I made a mistake because I used only part of my brain. That is going to be 17 times 2, so we're going to go with 34x squared, and then 17 times 3 is going to be a 51x. Okay, now I need to go through and subtract. So minus a minus turns plus. These cancel as they should. Combining these two, I'm going to get a 19x squared. Combining these two, since they are both negative, I'm going to get negative 57. And then I'm going to drop that 1. Okay, so then I'm going to go for my last round and think, what makes 19x squared when I divide it by x squared? I'm going to get a 19. Then I'm going to need to take, and I'm just making some more workspace over here, my 19 times x squared minus 2x plus 3. So 19x squared, as I was going for, a 38x, and then 19 times 3 is going to be a 57. When I go through to do my subtraction here, minus, this turns to plus, minus, gone as it should be. Then I'm going to have my negative 57 and add 38. So I'm going to have a negative 19x minus 56. Keeping in mind that I'm at the end of the row, so that makes this my remainder. And so then when I go through here, this is going to be a no because it says, is it a factor? Keeping in mind that factor means you have a remainder of 0, and mine does not have a remainder of 0. When I go to write my answer for that problem, keep in mind that you write the top part plus, and then your remainder over what you divided by. So this messy business over here is going to be how I would write my answer. Whew. All right, let's do synthetic division, so much easier. Here it says use synthetic division to determine if 4 is a 0. So that would mean I'd have to put a 4 here. I'd put my 2. I'm watching to make sure that I don't miss any powers of x. Then a negative 10, then a 5, then a negative 1. I've got everything I need. Drop the 2. So this will turn into 8. Then when I combine here, get negative 2, multiply those, combine for a negative 3. Then I'm going to multiply those, combine here for a negative 13, and multiply here. I got negative 52. So when I combine these, I got a negative 32, keeping in mind that that is my remainder. So if I wanted to know the answer, since this started as an x to the 4th, this would be an x cubed. So if they asked me for the answer for this division, I'd have 2x cubed minus 2x squared minus 3x minus 13. And then I would have to add a negative 32 over x minus 4, because that's what I would have been dividing by in order to have a 0 of 4. But the question says use synthetic division to determine if 4 is a 0 or solution. And the answer has to be no, because it didn't go in evenly. There wasn't a, or excuse me, I had a remainder. Okay, so if we're given that x minus 3 is one of our factors of x cubed minus 7x minus 6, it says use synthetic division to find the remaining factors and then list all the zeros. Okay. So if I have a factor of x minus 3, I have a 0 of 3, so that goes here. I have 1x cubed, no x squared, negative 7x's, and a negative 6 for my constant. Okay, drop the 1, bounce that up. Combine, get a 9. 2, get a 6. 0, awesome. And I know that's a 0. This was an x cubed, so this is an x squared. So I have x squared minus 3x, excuse me, plus 3x plus 2. So how can I, and it equals 0, sorry. How can I factor that? 2 times 1 will certainly add up to 3. These need to both be positive. So then my zeros will be those. So when it tells me to factor completely and find my solutions will be 3, negative 1, and negative 2. Okay, we're winding down. Given that negative 7 is a 0, okay, so now they gave me one of my zeros. They gave me negative 7, so that means x plus 7 must have been a factor. Again, it says to use synthetic division to find the remaining solutions or zeros. So I'm going to go ahead with my 1x cubed, 5x squared, minus 22x's, minus 56, and then I'm going to use my negative 7 that they gave me as a 0 to do my synthetic division. Drop this, bounce that up, get a negative 2, multiply, get a 14. Combining is going to give me a negative 8. And just as I had hoped and expected, I got a 0 because they told me it was a 0. This has dropped from an x cubed to an x squared. So I have x squared minus 2x minus 8. And I need that to equal 0. So can I factor 8 in a way that subtracts to be 2? Yep. 4 times 2. To get a negative 2, I'll have to lay it out like that. So my remaining factors are x plus 2, x minus 4, making my remaining solutions or zeros negative 2 and positive 4. So my final answer is that these are the 3 zeros or solutions that I'm looking for. All right, the grand finale. It says to write a standard form, least degree, integer coefficient, polynomial function. Okay, that's a lot of jibber jabber for jotting down the zeros they gave you, 0, negative 8, and 6, then going from zeros to factors to your polynomial. So this is pretty easy by now, hopefully. And then this one's always kind of a stumper, but the only way you would have a 0 of 0 is if one of your factors is an x. So now I have my factors. And you can multiply these in whatever order you'd like, but I guess I sort of just always start with FOILing. So I'll have first, outside, inside, last. I'll combine those middle terms, and then I'll distribute my x. And that, my friends, will be my polynomial of lowest degree possible to fit those in. So hopefully that helps you. Now you can be an expert, and that way you can just watch the parts you need. And I will see you Thursday. Bye, guys.